Greetings in the name of Jesus Christ. Paul would probably say greetings and salutations from Smiths Grove, Kentucky. We are 38 miles north of the Tennessee line, or 70 miles north of Nashville, Tennessee. And would you say about 120 miles, Larry, south of Louisville?
It's about 100.
About 100 miles south of Louisville. And we're a little town, but we're getting ready to go on the map as Buc-ee's is building it's unbelievable, the bulldozers and cranes and stuff that they have, they're building it. But we are Faith Assembly of God, P.O. Box 331, Smiths Grove, Kentucky, 42171, or on the computer we are KYFINGERS at AOL.com, Kentucky Fingers at AOL.com. And we have some things we want to share with you today, and my words on my phone have gone off. And let's see, I want to reach back and I want to cause us to think a little bit today. We thank you for joining in, and the only charge we charge is we asked if it all possible, could you pass this on to somebody else? The reach of our hands are so small. But I'd like to reach back to yesteryear and pull up this song. I couldn't find it, but Larry found it on my phone. And Alabama made a hit out of this song. It's called Leave Behind. After I leave for worlds unknown, over the borderline, never again on earth to know what will I leave behind. Leave behind, leave behind. What will I leave behind after I leave for worlds unknown? What will I leave behind? Will I be missed by those I love, or have I been unkind? And have I been true to God above? What will I leave behind? Leave behind, leave behind. What will I leave behind after I leave for worlds unknown? What will I leave behind? Listen to this last verse again. Will I be missed by those I love, or have I been unkind? Have I been true to God above? What will I leave behind? Leave behind, leave behind. What will I leave behind after I leave for worlds unknown? What will I leave behind? Something to think about. I would probably say young people don't think about that a whole bunch. I'm in this stage of life that I'm rounding the bend and coming in for a landing before too long, and I think about it a whole lot. I wonder, what will my last sermon be? What will my last lesson be? What will be the last lesson I teach, the last sermon I preach? I probably am more a teacher than I am a preacher. I guess I sort of take that after my dad. My dad pastored 65 years. That's almost unheard of. And I have that heritage, and I think about that, and I probably will tell a story or two about the past. But let me start off by telling you, there's some dark rooms that we have in our hearts, and we need to think about what we're going to leave behind. I'm told a story that before cars and motorized vehicles, that there was a family moving from Georgetown to Jamestown. And they had a covered wagon, and they had sold off a lot of their stuff, just put the necessities in. A man, his wife, and his kids loaded up in the wagon, and it was a 2-day trip from Georgetown to Jamestown. And they traveled, and it was starting to get dark, and they asked an old farmer, could they camp out, sleep underneath their wagon that night. And they explained that we're moving to Jamestown, and the farmer said, you're absolutely welcome to spend the night, and as a matter of fact, my wife's cooking, we'll just put on a little more food, and you be our guest for supper. And so the family that was moving agreed to that, and they had a good time of fellowship. They sat out on the porch, and beautiful night. They sat out on the porch, and the man moving said, do you know what kind of people live in Jamestown? And the old farmer said, well, what kind of people lived in Georgetown? And he said, oh, we had the meanest neighbors. That's why we're moving. That's why we're leaving Georgetown. That's why we are going to go to Jamestown. Said they're so mean. Said the people at the church was hypocrites. The preacher was nothing but trouble. And our neighbors, our kids couldn't get along. And it was just terrible. So we decided to move to Jamestown. And the man moving said to the old farmer, said, sir, what kind of people live in Jamestown? He said, well, you just sort of described them. That's how the people are in Jamestown. Well, be doggone if the next day a wagon was, some people was moving from Jamestown to Georgetown, just opposite directions. And the people asked for permission to spend the night, and the farmer said sure, and said we've got enough soup beans for everybody. Just eat with us. They sat on the porch that night, and the man said, "Have you heard how the people are in Georgetown?" And the guy says, "What kind of people lived in Jamestown?" He said they was the nicest people. Said we cried when we left. Our pastor and them had a dinner for us, and they're so nice. Our kids played with all the other kids. How we loved them. We love Jamestown, but we feel like because of our family needs that we need to move to Georgetown. He said, "What kind of people live in Georgetown?" And the man sitting on the swing on the porch said, "You described how they are in you described how they are in Georgetown. They're the nicest, sweetest people in Georgetown that you'll ever meet." And when they went to bed that night, the farmer's wife said, "Do you realize what you said?" The farmer said, "Yeah, I know what I said. How they were where they were is going to be the same way they are where they're going, because it's an attitude problem. And how they were here, it'll be the same way over here, because our attitudes, our behavior, our words." Let's add that with the thought of what will I leave behind after I leave for worlds unknown. One of these days I'm going to take a journey. We've had so many deaths lately. Did a funeral yesterday. Precious little old lady named Vesta, 95 years old. We've been going weekly to the rest home. When COVID was bad, she was dying, we thought. That's 2 years ago, something like that. And we just go one-on-one in her room, and we wear masks, and she'd wear masks, and we would sing for an hour for her. And it got where the other patients left the door, they opened the door, and they'd all gather around in the hallway with their masks, and we'd sing. Well, eventually, when COVID restrictions loosened up, we've been playing every day on Thursday for an hour and 10 minutes. We call that Ruby's Law. Ruby said I cheated her out of 10 minutes, so now we go 10 minutes over, so nobody can stand in eternity and say that I've cheated them out of 10 minutes. I don't want to face that. And we have the best time. We cry a little, we laugh a lot, we talk about fried chicken a whole lot. But I think about, I'm 71. I can't believe that. I'm 71. I'm near the end of my race. And I probably think daily, what am I leaving behind? We have this wonderful gift that God has given us called a memory. Memories are like Georgetown to Jamestown, Jamestown to Georgetown. Memories are whatever you make of them. Marriage is whatever you make of it. Somebody told me marriage was hell, and I said, that's because you made it that way. I've been married 52 years, and I sure hope I die before Linda does. I don't know what I'd do. I don't know where anything is. But one of the great gifts that God's given us is a memory. We have minds. We have stored information. I can remember when I was in the second grade, Deer Park Assembly of God. It's not there anymore. They sold the property and they built a new church. I thought I had it turned off. I remember Vacation Bible School, second grade. It was a Western theme. The song went something like this, the song that we sung all week. We're traveling the Christian trails today. We're watching for signs that leads the way. Well, I won't bore you with all of that, but each day there was a sign, and our lesson was about that sign. On Friday night, our lesson was Eureka. All the teachers dressed up like cowboys, and they had wagons there, and they had all of that. Eureka, I have found it. I thank God for those memories, and I will tell you that church did build a big new church in Montgomery, Ohio, on Pfeiffer Road there in Cincinnati, and I've been there several times. They, one year for Christmas, they didn't know who I was. New pastors, new people. A couple of the same old people was there. And they called our district office and said, do you have a little struggling mission church that the family could use something for Christmas? And our overseer, our superintendent, said, yeah, there's a little work in Prestonsburg, Kentucky that's really struggling. And that church sent to us, I met them halfway. I don't remember. I believe I met them in Ashland, Kentucky. They drove from Cincinnati to Ashland. I drove from Prestonsburg to there. And they made our Christmas that year. They had presents for both of my sons. They had presents for Linda and I. They brought a whole bunch of food and gave us a sum of money, which would have been about what we made a month. And they didn't know that I was a little boy in their Sunday school class, in their vacation Bible. Their pastor's name was Huff at that time, Gene Huff. Gene Huff left there and went to London, Kentucky, and served his life out there, and was one of our state senators for a long time. But you never know what you are going to do. There's a little kid that you can sow some seed in. There's an old person. It breaks my heart to think of old people sitting next to their telephone, just wanting to hear somebody call. Just would love to go for a ride. One of the things Linda and I do is we go by and pick up a widow and take them and get an ice cream cone. We just go for a ride. I probably, with all the driving and stuff I do, I probably would rather not get in a car. But I'm leaving behind something. And even if they die before I do, their families know what I have done. I'd like us to look at the memory of what we're recalling and what we've learned, and there's long-term memory and there's short-term memory. I had an uncle that's wife died, and later he got Alzheimer's and dementia. I don't know how to distinguish the difference before him. And the last little bit, he was in a rest home, had to be in a special rest home, and in Cincinnati. And I called my brother one day and I said, brother, why don't we go see our uncle and let's do it. We took my guitar and my dad went with us, and we went and we visited my uncle. He was crazier than a Bessie bug. We played. I don't know that I ever heard my uncle sing, but we got to get a guitar out. My dad had the mandolin, and I guess we played 2 hours and sang. Finally, as we went along, my uncle sort of came to himself. And as we left, my brother said, let's don't ever come and see him again. Let's don't ever come and see him again. And I said, why? He said, because he didn't know a whole lot. He didn't remember a lot, although he knew the songs and stuff. And I said, brother, I'm looking at it from a different angle. I'm not coming to see him. I'm coming for him. My mom's dead. Several uncles and aunts are dead. As a matter of fact, this uncle lived to be the oldest of his generation. We've got one uncle left in that family. But I drove from here to Cincinnati 3 hours, would you say, Larry?
Yeah.
Something like that. Just to be with my uncle again. I'm going to go to Jude chapter 1. As a matter of fact, there's only one chapter of Jude, verse 22. And some have compassion, make a difference. And others save with fear, pulling them out of the fire, hating even the garments spotted by flesh. We had a prayer request at church last night that this dad has probably not been a real good dad and probably not spoken to the family in years and all of those things. Has a brain cancers, tumors, multiple tumors in the brain and probably other places. And we had prayer that the daughter would have wisdom and opportunity to witness and lead her father. Oh man, some have compassion and they make a difference. Again, death has visited our camp. Here at our church, some of my good helpers have died. Some that I could count on for anything have died. And it makes me want to see that I'm sowing seed. I might not ever see it grow. I might not ever see it bear fruit. If you knew you was going to die tomorrow, I have some advice for you. If you knew you was going to die tomorrow, you should plant an apple tree today. I really believe that. And I hope you realize I'm not talking about an apple tree. I think you should plant something that will bear fruit even when you're gone. Some. That's not everybody. Some have compassion. Compassion is an emotion. It's a desire to help. Some people desire to help. It's being conscious of other people's distress with at least a desire to try to alleviate that. I know Job had 3 friends. Some people say, were they his friends? I believe they was. They came and sat several days with Job before they ever opened their mouth and said a word. I think they were friends. They didn't say the right things. They didn't do the right things, but they meant well, my opinion. They meant well. They come because they had compassion and they wanted to make a difference. Let me talk about that dark room that we all have. I was in the 2nd grade. We went to Indiana for my dad to preach at a series of meetings. And we left real early, 2 o'clock in the morning, to drive from our house in Ohio to Indiana. And my older brother and I were asleep in the back seat, a 1956 green and white Monterey Mercury. Had fender skirts on it, like you need to know all of that. And we woke up, and my mom and dad driving. Back then, ladies didn't drive. And my dad was driving, and my mom was sitting in the front seat, the 2 of us asleep in the back seat, and we woke up with them fussing and arguing. I do remember what they were arguing about. My mom had her belt up here in the particular dress she had on, and my dad said the belt should be down here. And from that discussion, it got more and more and more heated. Again, I'm in the second grade, and Dad stops the car and tells my mom to get out. I'm talking about dark rooms in our heart, painful memories. And he told my mom to get out of the car. My older brother and I started crying. He told her to get out. He reached over and opened the door and said, get out. And she wouldn't get out. We was in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. It was so foggy you couldn't hardly see. And I think part of that was the stress that brought this on. And I remember my dad taking his foot and pushing my mom out of the car. The door was shut and we left. I looked out the back window of that 56 Mercury. I looked out the back memory and I saw my mom. We sat there for a while. I thought, you know how little kids think. I thought, I'll never see my mom again. So I was trying to treasure that moment. And I was looking out the back window at my mom. Her belt was up here. We pulled away. My dad peeled out. We pulled away, and I watched my mom as she got smaller and smaller and smaller as we got distance away. Finally, in the fog, I lost all vision of my mom. Painful memory. My dad never realized, my mom never realized, what does it matter where you wear your belt? If you wear it up here or down here, or if you don't even wear it, it doesn't matter. But it was a painful memory for me. In my childhood mind, I didn't know we used to go up the road and sit for a while, go back and pick up mom and go to the church and my dad preach and all that. That's a dark room. And why do I tell you that story? Because I don't want you to build a dark memory for your children or your grandchildren. And yes, I built some. I promised myself that day when we turned around and went back and got mom. She crawled in. She was crying. My dad was crying. My older brother and I was crying. That's a dark memory. And I would love to somehow influence you, that you think about what you think about, how you act and what you talk. What am I leaving behind? What am I leaving behind? Am I leaving dark rooms? I know parents that scream. They can't talk to their kids. They scream. Did I make you jump, Larry? They scream at their kids all the time. They fuss at their kids all the time. I know a person that said never in their life did they ever hear their mom or dad ever say, I love you. And all of growing up never heard that. I can't remember a day that my mom and dad didn't say, I love you to us. There's 5 of us. There's 2 left. What will I leave behind? Will I be one of those people with compassion? My story's a little bit different. I promised God that day, God, I will never do that. When I get married, I'll never put my wife out of the car. Linda and I had traveled some distance to make a visit. And coming back, we got in a fuss over something. I have no idea. That's 40 years ago. I have no idea what we fussed about. But I remembered I'll never put her out. So I got out of the car And I sat on the guardrail, and I said, just go on home. Go on home. Just go on home. We was probably 18, 19 miles from home. And to my surprise, she got out, got in the driver's seat, and left. I sat on the guardrail for about an hour thinking, she's going to come back and get me. She's going to come back and get me. She didn't. I started walking. I only hitchhiked one time in my life. It was that night. I didn't want anybody to see who I was, so I hitchhiked like this. And I walked a mile, I walked 2 miles, I walked 3 miles. It come a terrible storm, thunder and lightning and rain pouring down, coming down in sheets. I was soaking wet. And she never did come back and get me. My memories are a little bit different there. Finally, I made it to where there was a bar, saloon, tavern, whatever you would call it. And I didn't have any money. And I went in, soaking wet, and I asked the guy leaning on the bar, could I borrow a quarter? And he gave me a quarter. I went over and dropped it in the payphone. Remember those? You remember those, Larry? You put the quarter in and it binged, and I called Linda. You ever use one?
I remember when they were a dime.
They was a quarter in this. I probably remember the dime ones too. And I dialed the number to the house, and Linda answered, and I said, where are you? She said, I've done what you told me to do. I come home. Well, sure enough, I did. I told her to do that. And I said, babe, I'm very sorry. Would you please come back and get me? And she come back and got me. So my story's a little different, but it's still an ugly story. But you're building a memory today. You call or don't call somebody. You visit or don't. The Bible defines sin very simply. To know to do good and to not do it is a sin. Wow. Wow. Again, let me read that verse to you. And some have compassion, make a difference. I guess in the heaviness of all the funerals and in the stress of 16-hour days for many days, I guess I want to hear. I want to hear the heart of people. I will tell you this, and I'll base it on a dog. When a dog's afraid, it will growl at you. It might even snap at you. It might even be your pet, but when it's afraid, when it's living in fear, it acts different. Let me tell you that there's some hurt people that's really hurting today. And let me tell you a thing that I've learned in 44 years of full-time ministry. Hurt people hurt people. At funerals, somebody's hurting real bad. What do? They hurt somebody else. And instead of taking the hurt that they're slinging towards us, we need to be one of those people that has compassion and makes a difference. Hurt people hurt people. I got to show mercy and kindness. In my Bible reading today, I got up at 5 this morning, and I've read and I ran across the word tender mercies. I love the word tender mercies. I love that word, tender mercies. God, may I be a person that instead of growling, I hadn't been driving long. I was probably 17. And this little white poodle, I had a 1961 Volkswagen Beetle, and this little white dog ran out in front of me, and there's nothing I could do. I hit it, and I felt so bad about it. I pulled my car over on the side of the road. I went back and I picked up that little white poodle, sat down on the ground, and held it on my lap. And I was trying to pet it. I knew it was dying. There's no way it could live. I didn't know whose it was. There's a bunch of houses around. I didn't know whose it was. But I sat there and I tried to pet the dog. And the dog turned and bit me real hard. It was hurting. And it thought I was hurting it. Sometimes you need to just bite your tongue and shut your mouth. And understand that that hurting person is hurting. And the only thing they know to do is to take it out on you. God, help me to listen to people. Help me to hear beyond the words that they're saying. Help me discern the need. Again, if you don't get nothing else, get hurt people. We're building memories. Years ago, in my early pastoral ministry, I was visiting a widow of probably one of the most successful preachers in the mountains. They didn't have television programs back then. They had radio programs. And he had radio programs in 4 or 5 of the counties. And the church that he pastored grew, and it was large. And well, after he pastored many years, he had a moral failure. Terrible, ugly moral failure. Ugly. He wasn't an educated guy, could barely write. And here he'd had all this success, and now his name is associated. If there were still people in that area that was old enough to remember, if I mentioned his name, they'd tell you about how dumb he was and how bad what he done. As a matter of fact, I was standing in his grave one day and somebody started giving me the scoop on that dead man, what he'd done. Well, I was visiting his widow, and she got a long distance call. Back then, calls were expensive, and she got a phone call from Indiana, and I said, you go ahead and talk to him, go in the other room, and I'll just sit here till you're done. And I reached down and I picked up his Bible. It was tattered. It was well worn. Again, he wasn't real educated and didn't write very well. And I was just flipping through his Bible, and on one page, the only page in the Bible had anything written on it. And it was an old man. You could tell his letters were shaking. And he penned these words in that Bible. And again, the only words in the Bible. And I just accidentally on purpose found it. He said, bury the past or it will bury you. Sometimes all we can do is dig a grave and bury stuff. Forget it and go on. That man, I tell you an ugly story, that man got real old and was financially pretty well off, and he went to a distant area to pastor a church and was very successful. And one day a guy from our county was driving through that area, 119. He was driving down the road and had a flat tire. He stopped at a garage to get the flat tire fixed, and he saw the church sign down there and saw that man's name. He was the pastor of the church. And he asked the guy at the garage, he said, he asked about that man and that name. Could it be a different man? And no, it was the same man. And that guy at the garage told the story of the terrible, ugly past that had been many years ago, and started, would you call it a rumor? It was a true story. And there were several people standing around. He told what that old man had done 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And the story got around the community, and it wasn't too long till that man had to leave that church and return back to, uh, I thought I had it all. Oh well. Do you have compassion to make a difference? Or do you remember other people's mistakes? I believe that God can change things. I really believe that. I believe God can change. Bury the past or it'll bury you. And many times I've used that in a sermon. Many times I've driven down the road and I thought, and listen, the old man was very sorry for what he'd done. He was, if he could have done it all over again, it would have never happened. Some people have compassion to make a difference. You need today to forgive somebody. You need to love somebody. You need to visit somebody or text message them or call or write them a letter. There was a pastor in the mountains named Lois Anderson. Here I am rambling again. She was a lady, and when ladies wasn't appreciated, and she come to this little church in the mountains from Pennsylvania. She came to help this old preacher, not the same preacher, different organization, and the old preacher died. And so the preacher's wife said, "I'll tell you what you'll do." Her name was Lois Anderson. Said, "If you'll stay, we'll keep this church open. And don't know how we'll make it, but we'll keep it open." And Lois agreed. And the old lady died. The preacher's wife died. And here Lois Anderson is stuck. And so she buys a ticket to return to Pennsylvania and up towards New York and return home. She wasn't married. She was a young woman. And while at that night she dreamed that that little church sitting on top of the hill, that it had a bright light coming out of it. And she dreamed, as she looked at the church, she dreamed that the light went out. It slowly, faintly, it dimmed, and it went totally out. And the next morning she took her Greyhound bus ticket back and got her money back. And she spent her whole life at that church. And again, in the mountains especially, and back then, women weren't appreciated. She kept the doors to that church open by teaching Sunday school. She had an old station wagon, and she'd go around the community. And one day, Linda and I, she's an old woman near death, we felt a burden for her. And we went around and took up food. We called them poundings back then. We took up food and we took stuff and we went to the church. She actually lived in the back of the church, in the little room in the church. And we beat on the door, and she never heard us. We knew she was there. Her station wagon was there. She finally came to the door. She had on 3 coats. She had on 2 pairs of gloves. She had on a boggin pulled down over her ears. And we said, "Is the furnace tore up? Are you out of gas?" And she said, No, I only use the gas and the heat. I only use it during service time. I live here without heat, saving the gas. Wow. She made a difference in that community by touching kids. Grown-ups wouldn't come to the church. She changed. That little church is still sitting up on the hill there. When I go through McGoffin County, I always look over at that church. Lois has been dead for years, but she made a difference. I'm asking you, there's something you could do. You could sing a song. You could give a testimony. You could take a person for a ride. You could go visit a sick person. You could make a hospital visit. You could go to the rest home. There's something you could do. There's a little kid that smells like urine because he wet the bed last night because mom and dad was drunk and they fought all night long. He has that dark room that will always be in his heart. Would you bring your light into that dark room? Would you do that? You never know what you're going to do and how God's going to bless it. You don't know. One day this mom, I don't know why she couldn't go see Jesus, but her boy wanted to go see Jesus, and she packed his lunch. She gave him some biscuits and a couple of fish, and she packed his lunch, and he went to see Jesus. And the problem occurred while he was there. He had compassion. Everybody was hungry, and he goes up to the preachers and said, here's my lunch. Jesus can eat my lunch. Didn't know in one day God's going to change and raise a testimony that we still talk about 2,000 years later. That one boy's mom packing him a lunch made a difference. 5,000 men were fed, not counting the women and the children. Why? Because he offered his lunch to Jesus. And Jesus takes it and he blesses it. I want to tell you, if you would just do what you can do, where you can, when you can, if you would do that, I guarantee to you that God would bless, that God will bless. And you can take your light into a dark room. I was at the hospital one time, and two sisters were arguing and fighting and fussing. That mom was dying. I don't know what they was arguing and fussing about. And I walked in the room, and a great peace came over the room. And the one sister said to the other sister that they'd actually thrown a few punches at each other. Said, did you notice when that preacher came in the room that peace came with him? Somebody needs you to take peace in their dark corner. The darker the night, the greater the light. Somebody needs you to bring their light, your light. And honestly, it's not your light. You're the candle. It's his light that shines. And the darker it is, the brighter a little light can be. There was a lady that was walking through a dark day. Wow. She'd been thinking for several days and realized that the food was going down, and they realized today it'll be the last meal we ever eat. And then she's going to watch her son starve to death, and she's going to die. Very dark day. And she's out picking up sticks. That's 1 Kings 17:11. I skipped a verse there, Larry. She's just picking up sticks, crying. This is the last meal. And a preacher, God sent a preacher by him, said, fix me a cake first. Not your son and you, fix me first. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. I hope you pay your tithes. I hope you give offerings. I hope you give to missions, because it makes a difference. And that preacher asked her to do that, and something come up in her and said, well, we're going to die anyway. Let's give the preacher. He needs, and she fixes him a cake. And his little light in that dark situation, and if you'll study, she's not a Jew. She's not really qualified. Even Jesus mentions that in the New Testament. Why was she picked out? Because she accepted the light of the preacher. And her meal never ran out. Why? Because the preacher's compassion made a difference. And her compassion made a difference to her son. Wow. 2 Kings 7 verse 3, going back, there's 4 guys that they're leprous men. Leprosy is terrible. I've never seen it. I've seen pictures of it. It's almost eradicated in the modern world, but in biblical times it was terrible. It is flesh rot. It's infection. It usually really thrives. Your nose rots off. Can you imagine the smell that you smelled as your nose is rotten, and your ears, your fingers, your toes, they rot off? And here's these 4 men. What can they do? If they go into the city, you read it, 2 Kings 7. If they go into the city, they're going to die because they are starving to death. If they go to the enemy's camp, they're going to get killed. What choice do they have? And they say in 2 Kings 7 verse 3, why do we just sit here till we die? Who knows? God might do something. Again, they can't go home. They have to cry out, unclean, unclean, if anybody gets near them. And they head towards the enemy camp, and when they get there, there's a grilled T-bone steak, there's corn on the cob, there's all that, and they eat till they're full. And one of them says to the other one, we don't do well sitting here. Burp. This food sure was good. Burp. But there's people starving to death at home. And they go back and they tell that the enemy's gone. And all the spoils, all the food, all the cattle, it's all there just for the taking. The preacher had prophesied by this time tomorrow there's going to be food and plenty. And the man says there's no way, even if the windows in heaven open. There is a way. If you have compassion to make a difference. What if those 4 people had not done something? The people were eating donkeys' heads and pigeon manure in the city. They made a difference. And the king says, it's just a trap. They're trying to lure us out. And the men said, no. And the next day there was food, just like the preacher said. Why? Because 4 men said, we're not going to sit here till we die. We're going to do something. We're going to do something. You're building a memory right now. You're building a memory right now. I was with my granddaughter the other day. I had 1 granddaughter, 5 grandsons. And I gave her a $5 bill. she went and sat down next to this other girl. She come back and she didn't say nothing, but she sort of looked at me with that granddaughter eye. And I got a dollar bill out and told her to give her friend a dollar bill. Linda told me, sat next to me, and Linda said, "That's not fair. You gave yours $5. Give her $5. So I gave her $5. I doubt she'll remember that. I doubt that, but I will. Those people that was around will. Your deeds of compassion can make a difference. They can make a difference. They can make a difference. The other day, my time's almost gone. The other day, a friend called me from northern Indiana and said, "Did Linda call me?" Said, "I've been trying to get back with her." No. I don't know. She might have. So I called the lady back, and the lady was going through a terrible, terrible, terrible crisis at the dollar store. And I talked, and we cried, we prayed 2 or 3 times. And it all come about because Linda's phone butt dialed this lady. When we got done, I hung up and I said, "Linda, why did you call her?" Linda said, "I didn't call her." We got home and looked at Linda's phone, and sure enough, there's the phone number. Linda's phone called it, but Linda didn't call it. But then that got the message, and we was able to minister to the need. If you'll submit yourself to God, you can make a difference. The preacher's arms are hanging down. They're winning. They're losing. They're winning. They're losing. The preacher had 2 people get under his arms and lift him up. They made a difference. We know their names today. Aaron was on one side and Hur, H-U-R, was on the other side. They made a difference. And listen, today we got a Secret, and we got, I can't think of deodorants names. Help me, Larry. Some, whatever. Deodorants, we got it and we rub it on. They probably didn't have it. In the heat of the battle, I believe that preacher was sweaty, and I believe his armpits stunk. Wow. But they got under his arms and lifted him up. They made a difference just simply by pulling up a rock, setting the preacher down, and holding his hands. There's a preacher today that you could encourage. He's tired. He just needs somebody to encourage him. There's a Sunday school teacher that's poured theirself out, and nobody said a kind word. Nobody said a kind word. You can make a difference today. Don't make a dark room darker. We ask 2 things of you, if there's any way possible. My hands are so small. The call of God is so big on my life, but my reach is so small. I can't reach very far. You can help me by partnering with me and Larry. Larry does all the work. You could partner with us, lift up our arms and pass it on to somebody. Somebody needs to know they can make a difference. If you could pass it on. And if you're one of those people that don't know Jesus Christ as your Savior, or if you're backslidden, if you're not attending church, there's a preacher that would really be encouraged if you would show up Sunday morning. He'd be double encouraged. I have a friend of mine that told me how they love to go to church on Sunday night. They have to work on Sunday morning. And said there's not one church in their town has a Sunday night service. If you don't know Jesus Christ, would you please accept him as your Savior? Thank you for watching. Thank you, Mr. Larry Carter. I don't think I mentioned him at the first. Larry lifts my arms. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. I'm Wade Martin Hughes, Sr. On the other side of the camera is Mr. Larry Carter. Thank you for watching and make a difference. Somebody needs you. Make a difference.